She's a criminal, I'm telling you. That's what our HOA president screamed into her phone while frantically dialing 911 just because my wife didn't answer the door. After nearly 20 minutes of relentless knocking, Karina, yes, that kind of Karina, finally snapped. When the police arrived, she was out front, pointing toward our house like a woman possessed. "Arrest her, right now," she demanded. But when Sarah finally opened the door and showed the officers something, they went completely still. The smug victory on our HOA president's face vanished, replaced with a look of pure dread. She had just made a huge, irreversible mistake with the absolute wrong person. This all started 2 weeks after we moved into what we thought would be our forever home. Sarah had just landed a huge promotion at work, though she was being oddly quiet about the details. "Please don't tell anyone what I do, at least not yet," she told me while unpacking boxes in the kitchen. "Just say I work in finance if anyone asks." "I just need a bit of time before people know," I agreed without pressing her. Sarah had always been the brains in our relationship, and if she wanted to be discreet, I respected that. I had no clue that this simple request would ignite the wildest neighborhood drama of our lives. It was a perfect Saturday morning when I first encountered Deborah, although calling it a perfect feels generous, given what followed. I was in the front yard, digging through boxes to find our gardening tools, when I noticed a woman on the sidewalk, arms folded, glaring at our house like it had personally offended her. She looked to be in her late 50s, sporting the classic "I need to speak with your manager" haircut. That should have been my first clue. She watched me struggle with the boxes for a full 5 minutes before storming over like she was marching into battle. "I'm Deborah, president of the Homeowners Association," she barked, thrusting a massive binder into my hands. "These are the HOA rules. You're required to read every page." The binder had to weigh 10 pounds, at least 300 pages of strict neighborhood standards. I flipped through it and saw everything from long-length requirements to a strict list of acceptable beige shades for garage doors. "Wow, a broken bar, this is thorough," I said, trying to sound polite. Her eyes narrowed. "We take community standards seriously here. I'll be monitoring your compliance." At that moment, little Tommy from next door rode by on his bike, about 8 years old, all freckles and energy. "Hi, mister," he chirped at me. Then he looked at Deborah and frowned. "Why are you always so angry, Mrs. Deborah?" "Ah, kids, always saying what the rest of us are thinking." Just then, Sarah came outside carrying a box labeled "Office." Her hair was neatly tied back, and even in jeans and a t-shirt, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that always amazed me. Deborah's eyes snapped toward her. "And you are?" she demanded, as if Sarah needed clearance to stand on her own front lawn. "Sarah, Michael's wife," she replied calmly, setting the box down. "Nice to meet you." Deborah gave her a long, suspicious look, like she was trying to recognize her. "You seem familiar. What do you do for work?" There was an edge in her tone, less curiosity and more interrogation. "Finance," Sarah replied smoothly. "Pretty boring stuff." Deborah clearly didn't buy it, but before she could press further, Tommy wiped out and crashed into our mailbox. "Sorry," he called out, scrambling to his feet. Sarah rushed over to help him. I noticed Deborah watching her like a hawk, suspicion practically radiating off her. "You okay, buddy?" Sarah asked as she checked his knee. "I'm fine." "Hey, a broken bar? Are you a police officer?" "You look like one." "Gotta love kids and their wild guesses." Sarah laughed. "No, sweetie, I work with numbers, not bad guys." She gave him a gentle pat on the head before sending him on his way, but the look Deborah shot her as she walked away a pure venom. After Deborah finally left, binder and attitude in tow, Sarah and I sat on the porch. "That woman creeps me out," I admitted. Sarah just smiled mysteriously. "Don't worry, people like her always give themselves enough rope to hang with." Over the next few days, Deborah made sure we knew she was watching. The emails started almost immediately. "Your tree appears to exceed the maximum height limit by 2.5 millimeters. Trash bins placed at a 15 degrees angle off the approved alignment. Vehicle extends half an inch beyond the designated boundary." Not joking, she actually measured this stuff. And every message was CC'd to the entire HOA board, like she was preparing some grand legal case. I wanted to fire back and tell her to get a life, but Sarah always stopped me. "Let her waste her energy. she said. We haven't done anything wrong. Still, I could tell it was getting to her, especially when Deborah began her daily patrols. She walked by our house 3 times a day, always slowing down to inspect our property. Neighbors began quietly warning us. She made the Johnsons repaint their fence 3 times. A broken bar said it wasn't the right shade of Sahara beige, one older gentleman told me at the mailbox. And poor Mrs. Chen had to give up her dog because Deborah filed noise complaints for every single bark, another whispered. One neighbor mentioned that Deborah's son had been arrested the previous year as some sort of misunderstanding, but ever since then, she'd become even more controlling and paranoid, especially around anyone she thought might hold authority. It all started to make sense, but nothing could have prepared us for what came next. It was a Thursday afternoon when the real chaos began. I was at work, and Sarah was on an important video call, something she couldn't step away from. That's when Deborah showed up and began pounding on our door like a battering ram. Sarah watched her through the security camera, red-faced and furious, but couldn't leave the meeting. For 20 minutes, Deborah banged on the door, rang the bell, and even tried peeking through the windows. Eventually, she gave up, but not before yelling loud enough for the entire street to hear, "I know you're in there. I'll show you who's in charge around here." When Sarah told me later that evening, I laughed it off, but she looked deadly serious. "She's escalating," she said quietly. "People like her don't just walk away." I should have taken her seriously, because the next day, as I pulled into the driveway, I heard a sound that sent chills down my spine. Police sirens, getting louder, heading straight for our house. And I just knew a broken bar, something major was about to go down. The next day, an envelope showed up in our mailbox, stiff and official looking, stamped with authority and smugness. The sender, the HOA, naturally. The letter inside began with, "Formal notice, violation of HOA guideline ESA," and it only got worse from there. According to Deborah, we had broken multiple rules. Apparently, we failed to uphold the expectation of neighborly engagement and were guilty of fostering an unfriendly environment by not participating in what she called reasonable social interaction. The letter threatened hefty fines up to $5,000 and even suggested possible legal action if we didn't immediately correct our behavior and align with community standards. I read the whole thing aloud at the dinner table, trying to mask my irritation. Sarah took the letter from me, glanced through it, and then to my surprise he laughed. Not a strained or nervous laugh either. It was genuine amusement. "She's really stretching now," Sarah said with a grin. Then, without a hint of hesitation, she ripped the letter in half and tossed it into the trash. "Shouldn't we respond?" I asked, my anxiety flaring up again. What if she actually tries to follow through on this? Sarah reached across the table and gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Trust me, love. She's digging her own grave. The more she escalates, the worse it'll be for her." But I couldn't match her calm. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining all the ways this could spiral. I even ended up calling my mom, something I rarely do. "Mom, I think we might need to stay with you for a few days," I said, half joking. Our neighbors lost her mind. She chuckled. "Michael, you're 35 years old. You can't go running home just because someone's being mean to you." She wasn't wrong. But I didn't feel any better. The next morning, I left early to avoid any run-in with Deborah. Sarah kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong, that same calm smile still on her face. "Have a good day, honey. Stop worrying so much." I should have known something was coming. Around lunchtime, my coworker Jake gave me a lift back home. Me and my car was still in the shop, and that's when we saw her. Deborah was out in her yard, setting up a phone on a tripod, talking loudly and dramatically to the camera. "Is Shay Broken Bar live streaming?" Jake asked, completely baffled. I sighed. "That's our HOA president. She's been breathing down our necks since we moved in." We couldn't hear everything she was saying, but she kept waving toward our house, gesturing like she was reporting on a national emergency. As Jake pulled into my driveway, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. Sarah's car was in the garage, so she was definitely home, probably on another one of her critical video calls. I thanked Jake, went inside, and tried to ignore the bizarre scene across the street. But then things got worse. While I was making a sandwich in the kitchen, I heard Deborah's voice rising outside. I looked out and saw her pacing her yard with her phone no longer pointed at an audiencia this time. She was on a real call. Her face was flushed and her movements erratic. Then I caught the words that stopped me cold. "Hello, 911? I need to report a suspicious person at 3427 Maple Street. A broken bar. My sandwich sat forgotten on the counter." I leaned closer to the window to hear. "There's a woman there who won't open her door or speak to neighbors. She's acting shady. I'm pretty sure I saw her face on a wanted poster." My jaw dropped. She was seriously calling the cops on Sarah for not answering the door? I could barely hear the dispatcher's voice, but it was on speaker. Deborah wanted her imaginary audience to hear it all. "Ma'am, what is the actual emergency?" the dispatcher asked patiently. "She might be making drugs or planning something violent. I demand officers come immediately." Deborah's voice was reaching operatic levels of hysteria. "Has this person threatened you or committed a crime?" the dispatcher asked. "She's threatening the peace of our whole community. I know criminal behavior when I see it." The call dragged on, with Deborah growing more unhinged by the second, inventing increasingly wild stories. She said we received mysterious packages, our moving boxes, and had suspicious visitors. The pizza delivery guy. About 20 minutes later, the wail of sirens pierced the air. My heart pounded like a drum. A police cruiser rolled up in front of our house. Officer Martinez stepped out. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, with that kind of wide-eyed energy that comes with being new to the job. Deborah practically sprinted toward him, phone in hand, still filming. "Officer, thank goodness. That woman, she's dangerous. I just know it," she cried, jabbing a finger toward our house. Martinez blinked in confusion, then composed himself and pulled out a notepad. "Ma'am, please calm down. What crime are we talking about here?" he asked. "She won't open her door. She's clearly hiding something. You need to search that house immediately." He sighed. I could see the gears turning in his head as he tried to remain professional. "Ma'am, not answering a door isn't illegal. Do you have any real evidence of criminal activity?" Deborah wouldn't let up. "I am the HOA president. I know this community. That woman's a threat, and you need to act now." That was my breaking point. My hands shook as I opened the front door, ready to step outside. But before I could, Sarah appeared. She walked out from the garage, calm and collected. She wore her usual outfit of jeans and a blousey, but something about the way she carried herself was different. Confident, commanding. Even Officer Martinez straightened up instinctively as she approached. "Good afternoon, officer," Sarah said, voice level and composed. "Is there a problem?" He looked relieved to be speaking to someone sane. "We received a call about suspicious behavior at this address. I just need to ask a few questions." Deborah immediately butted in. "She refuses to talk to neighbors. She's hiding something." Sarah didn't even glance at her. Her attention stayed on Martinez. Then, I noticed her reach behind her back. Martinez did too, and instinctively shifted, hand moving toward his holster. "She's got something," Deborah shrieked. "She's armed." But what Sarah pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was something far more devastating to Deborah's crusade. A small, polished silver badge gleamed in the sunlight. Martinez froze in place the moment he saw it. I knew, then, things had just turned a very interesting corner. Officer Martinez stood frozen, staring at whatever Sarah was holding. His eyes grew wider with each passing second. I couldn't see it clearly from where I was at the window, but I could see the color draining from his face. Deborah, on the other hand, looked ready to explode with excitement. She was practically bouncing, clearly expecting the front row seat to Sarah's arresta or something even more dramatic. "Well, what are you waiting for?" she barked, still filming. "Arrest her. She's obviously hiding something." But Martinez wasn't listening to her anymore. His full attention was locked on Sarah. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with nervous disbelief. "Is that a broken bar? Are you? Oh my God." He straightened up so fast it looked like he pulled a muscle. His hand flew into a salute. "For Chief Johnson, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. No one told me you were a broken bar. I mean, Mama Sarah Chief." His words hit me like a truck. "Chief? Did he just call Sarah Chief?" I thought I must have misheard him. But then Martinez kept talking, stumbling over his words in a full-on panic. "Chief Johnson, I truly apologize. I was just responding to a suspicious activity. Callie, I didn't know this was your address. The dispatcher didn't mention anything. I haven't seen the new directive about your appointment yet. A broken bar. Sarah raised a hand, and Martinez went quiet immediately. He stood at attention like he was back at the academy. At ease, Officer Martinez, she said, her tone sharp and commanding. You were just doing your job. I appreciate your vigilance. She turned slightly, and that's when I got a clear view of what she was holding. A badge, a silver, gleaming, and unmistakable. But not just any badge. From where I stood, I could make out the words Chief of Police, and the star. My knees buckled. My wife, the same woman I'd been married to for 7 years, the one I believed worked a bland finance job, was the city's police chief, the top-ranking officer in the entire department. How had I not known? My mind raced. Late-night phone calls, mysterious meetings in the garage, the suits I thought were for boring board meetings, the way she always knew when cops had radar guns out on my commute. It all made sense now, but it also made no sense. Why hadn't she told me? As the reality set in, another sound snapped me back to the present. Deborah. She let out a strange, pitiful squeak, like a balloon slowly losing air. No, a broken bar, she whispered, her phone lowering. No, that's not possible. You're lying. This is fake. Her face was a kaleidoscope of chaos, a red from humiliation, white with shock, then a kind of nauseated green that made her look like she might collapse. Eventually, it settled on a kind of purple that matched her HOA president blazer. Her mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish struggling for air. Meanwhile, Martinez looked like he wanted to sink into the earth and disappear. "Chfa broken bar, should I? You at broken bar file a report?" he asked, nervously. This was a false emergency call, and Ms. Henderson's accusations were pretty serious. "It's Ms. Cunningham," Deborah corrected faintly, though her voice was barely audible. Sarah stared at her, silent for a long moment, her eyes calculating. "Officer Martinez," she said at last, "I want you to document everything of the false emergency report, the ongoing harassment, and especially the part where Miss Cunningham accused me of criminal activity without a shred of proof. Make sure you include that she's the HOA president and has been abusing the troll to intimidate new residents." Martinez nodded, flipping open his notebook. "Yes, ma'am." "Should I, my broken bar, should I place her under arrest for misuse of emergency services?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud about to burst. That's when the real show began. Neighbors who'd been pretending to water plants or casually check their mail gave up all pretense and began gathering. Some stepped into their driveways, others came right up to their fences. Tommy rolled up on his bike again, eyes sparkling. "Whoa, Mrs. Sarah's a cop? A real cop?" He looked at his friends. "I told you she looked like a cop. You owe me $5. Apparently, the kids in the neighborhood had been taking bets. Everything from FBI agent to secret agent had been floated. But Chief of Police, no one saw that coming. Someone from across the street yelled, "Karma!" And suddenly, phones were everywhere. Cameras were out. Deborah's meltdown was about to be recorded from every angle and shared far and wide. She saw it too. Her expression morphed into desperation. "Wait!" she shouted, that manic glint returning to her eyes. A twisted grin stretched across her face. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" She held her phone high like it was a weapon. "I have evidence. Proof that you're not fit to be police chief." She waved the phone around dramatically. "I know things. Sarah Johnson, one call and your whole career's over. The mayor will know. The media, city council." She was practically foaming at the mouth, like a villain who thinks she has one final trump card to play. Sarah didn't flinch, but something shifted in her eyes. And not fear, a broken bar strategy. "Ms. Cunningham," Sarah said, voice suddenly low and dangerous, "I suggest you choose your next words very carefully." She pointed to Officer Martinez, who was still jotting things down, "especially when those words could be considered blackmail against a sworn law enforcement officer, and especially when you're saying them in front of a witness." But Deborah had lost it. "It's not blackmail if it's true," she shrieked. "I have the photos. I saw the thing, with those people, at that place." She was flailing wildly now, grasping for credibility, throwing vague accusations without substance, trying to keep the upper hand. The crowd was loving it. Phones were still rolling. This was better than any Netflix drama. And Sarah? She was just getting started. Sarah took a calm step forward, and to my surprise, Deborah actually retreated, clutching her phone against her chest like it was a shield. Then show me, Sarah said, her tone steady. If you have something, let's see it, right now, in front of everyone. The challenge was clear, and it was delivered with the confidence of someone either completely innocent or fully prepared to shut down whatever nonsense Deborah had cooked up. Deborah's thumb hovered over her phone screen as her eyes darted between Sarah, Officer Martinez, and the growing crowd of curious neighbors. "Yeah, I'll show it to the proper authorities," she stammered. "Not here. Not in front of." She vaguely motioned toward the group now watching like it was a live courtroom drama. "This is official HOA business." That's when Sarah gave her a smiley, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile a lion gives just before pouncing. "Officer Martinez is a proper authority," Sarah replied. "So am I. Either show us what you've got, or admit you don't have anything." You could practically feel the tension thicken the air. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see if Deborah actually had any ammunition, or if this was just another one of her empty threats. The entire crowd was riveted. Someone whispered, "What could she even have on the police chief?" Another muttered, "This is better than Netflix." After what felt like an eternity but was probably just a minute, Deborah's act collapsed. Her hand, which had been gripping her phone so tightly, began to shake. She slowly lowered it to her side. I need to speak to my lawyer first," she mumbled. And that, of course, meant she had nothing at all. Sarah gave Officer Martinez a quick nod. "Ms. Cunningham," he said as he stepped forward, trying to sound composed, "I'll need you to come to the station to file a formal statement about your emergency call." Deborah's eyes went wide. "What? No, I'm not going anywhere. I know my rights." Martinez looked uncertain and glanced again at Sarah, who gave a subtle signal. "You're not under arrest," Martinez said calmly, "yet. But you did make a false emergency call. We need to officially document it. You can come willingly or risk being charged with harassment." Deborah let out a high-pitched noise and spun toward the crowd, trying to rally support. "You all see this, right? She's using her position to silence me." "I'm trying to protect the neighborhood." But the crowd wasn't on her side anymore. I heard murmurs of "about time," and she had this coming. An older man shouted, "Deborah, you fined me $300 because my gnome was facing west." Another added, "You made my daughter cry for selling Girl Scout cookies." Who does that? The crowd had turned, completely. Even the other HOA board members who had drifted and were keeping their distance, no doubt already thinking about how to remove her from office. Sarah stepped forward and addressed everyone. "I'm sorry for the disturbance. As some of you may have guessed, I'm the city's new chief of police. I was hoping to stay low-key while we settled in, but unfortunately, that's no longer possible." She nodded toward Deborah. "I want to assure all of you that I take every concern seriously, legitimate ones. What I don't tolerate is harassment, false reports, or the abuse of emergency services." There were nods and even few cheers. Someone began clapping, then more joined in. Within seconds, half the neighborhood was applauding. Deborah's face twisted in fury. "This isn't over," she snapped. "You haven't heard the last of me. I have connections. The mayor golfs with my cousin." Sarah's response was a calm, controlled smile. "Please send the mayor my regards. We had dinner last week to celebrate my appointment." Deborah's entire posture sagged as if the wind had been knocked out of her. Officer Martinez then calmly escorted her to his cruiser. No handcuffs, but it was very clear she wasn't going by choice. The neighbors gradually dispersed. Many stopped by to introduce themselves properly to Sarah, apologizing for not warning us sooner about Deborah's antics. Tommy and his crew were the last to leave, still full of questions. "Do you carry a gun? Have you ever caught a bad guy? Can you do a backflip?" That last one made Sarah laugh. "No backflips, buddy, that's more of a movie thing." Eventually, everyone went home, and Sarah and I found ourselves alone on our porch. "So Broken Bar Police Chief?" I asked, my voice unsure whether to sound proud, confused, or slightly betrayed. She reached out, took my hand gently. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she said. The appointment was confidential until the official announcement next week. There are some sensitive investigations going and now we had to keep it quiet. She explained that she had been deputy chief in our former city, and when the top job here opened up, they recruited her. She was going to surprise me after the announcement to take me to that steakhouse I loved, champagne and all. I had to admit it would have been one heck of a reveal. Much better than Deborah forcing it out in the front yard. So broken bar all those finance meetings, department budgets, hiring committees, crime data reviews, she said with a small grin. I wasn't really lying. I do work with numbers, so broken bar just crime stats. That night, I couldn't sleep, but this time, it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. I kept thinking about how I'd missed the signs. The way she always insisted on driving, always knew where speed traps were, never seemed concerned walking alone at night, and how she once took down a door-to-door salesman like a scene straight out of an action film. She'd said it was self-defense training. Now I knew better. At around 3 a.m., I heard her on the phone in the bathroom. Her voice was low, serious. I only caught pieces. Something about active investigations, keeping a low profile, and the situation being handled. But one exchange froze me. Yes sir, I understand. No, she doesn't have anything solid. I was careful. Pause. The Johnson case. That was 5 years ago. Different jurisdiction. She couldn't possibly have broken bar. Then another pause. What do you mean someone leaked it? My stomach turned. Sarah sounded concerned. Truly concerned for the first time since all of this began. If Cunningham got her hands on sealed records of broken bar. No, you're right. We'll have to get ahead of it. Then came another pause. And then something that chilled me more than sirens ever could. Moving? No, I can't just uproot my family. Not over this. Her voice cracked slightly. I understand. If it comes to that, a broken bar, we'll do what we must. But I'm not running from some HOA president with delusions of grandeur. She returned to bed quietly. I pretended to be asleep, but my thoughts were racing. What was the Johnson case? What sealed records? And why would we need to move? The next morning, over coffee, I tried to bring it up casually. Everything all right with work? She glanced at me over her mug, as if trying to decide how much to say. Deborah may be more resourceful than we gave her credit for, she admitted. She's been making calls, digging. She won't find anything usably broken bar. Boot to broken bar. She trailed off. But what? I pressed her gently, trying to understand what we were really up against. Sometimes in this job, Sarah said carefully, you make decisions that can look bad out of context, and people like Deborah, they thrive on twisting things out of context. The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't over and not even close. Deborah might have lost the first round, but she was clearly gearing up for something bigger. And if I'd learned anything about my wife recently, it was that she hadn't become chief of police by backing down from a fight. But the Johnson case, whatever it was still gnawing at her, still making her careful, still keeping her up at night. What was she hiding? The following days were eerily quiet, which, somehow, felt worse. Like we were stuck in the middle of a breath, waiting for the storm to come crashing down. A shoe was going to drop. It was just a question of when, and judging by the sound of it, it'd be a steel-toed boot aimed straight at our lives. Sarah continued going to work, now fully in uniform. I had to admit, she looked incredible in it. Strong, commanding. The neighbors started treating us differently. Some offered friendly nods or stiff smiles. Others gave us the kind of overly polite greetings reserved for people who could, hypothetically, have them arrested. But Deborah? She had vanished. Not a peep, not a post, not a passive-aggressive note. And that silence was the loudest of all. She's not done, Sarah said over breakfast on the third morning. People like her don't quit. They regroup, and then they come back harder. I believed Hira, especially after hearing that late-night phone call. Whatever had happened in the Johnson case, it had Sarah rattled, and that rattled me. Of course, the story had already made the rounds at my office. When a resident calls the cops on the police chief and the whole thing ends up on social media, you can bet it spreads like wildfire. Dude, Jake said over lunch, shaking his head, your wife is an absolute legend. That whole lady looked like she was gonna spontaneously combust. Apparently, half the neighborhood had posted videos of the incident, and they were racking up views. The comments were brutal. Most were memes, jokes, or people applauding Sarah. One popular comment read, "Show this to every Karen who thinks she runs the block." Another said, "And that, folks, is how you handle a power-tripping HOA president." But beneath the laughter, I noticed something unsettling. Some comments mentioned Deborah by Namia and her supposed plans to dig up dirt, claims that she was doing research, hunting for proof, gathering receipts. That evening, we got a knock on the door. Tommy, he looked unusually serious. "Mrs. Sarah," he said, eyes wide, "I thought you should know something." Sarah knelt down. "What is it, buddy?" He leaned in and whispered like a little secret agent. "Mrs. Cunningham's at the library every day. My mom works there. She says she's always on the computers and printing stuff." He glanced around before adding, "Mom thinks she's researching you." Sarah smiled and tousled his hair. "Thanks for the intel, detective. You're a natural." But the second Tommy left, her face hardened. "She's digging through public records," Sarah muttered. "Court filings, archived news reports, anything she can spin into a narrative." My stomach dropped. Should we be worried? She didn't answer right away, which said everything. That night, after she went to bed, I did something I'm not exactly proud of. I Googled my own wife. I searched Sarah Johnson alongside keywords like controversy, investigation, excessive force, and of course, Johnson case. Most of what came up was exactly what you'd expect: community service, awards, successful operations, commendations. But buried deep a third page of results I found something. A short article, vague in details. Deputy Chief S. Johnson cleared in suspect injury investigation. The article was brief. A suspect had been hurt during an arrest. An inquiry had been conducted. Sarah had been cleared. The records were sealed at the request of all parties. That was it. No names, no context. But if I could find Ida Broken Bar, so could Deborah. And I had a feeling Deborah had found more than just a headline. The confirmation came the next morning, a new email in our HOA inbox. Not from Deborah directly, but from a newly minted group called Concerned Residents for Neighborhood Integrity. Totally not subtle. The message was short: emergency home meeting a Thursday 7 p.m. Attendance mandatory. Topic: neighborhood safety. Signed, your HOA board. 3 names were listed, but I'd bet anything Deborah had pressured them into it. Sarah read the email over my shoulder. "She found something," she said quietly. "Or at least a broken bar she thinks she did." I turned to face her. "Sarah, broken bar? What is the Johnson case?" She was silent for a long time. Just when I thought she might stay that way, she spoke. "A suspect got injured during an arrest. Claimed I used excessive force." She paused. Her jaw clenched. "I was investigated, cleared, but the optics of broken bar weren't great. It could look bad if someone wants it to." She didn't need to say more. Deborah didn't have to prove anything. She just had to suggest something and let public opinion do the rest. "So broken bar, what do we do?" I asked. Sarah's smile was sharp. "Dangerous. We go to the meeting," she said, and we let her show her hand. The way she said it told me she had her own cards to play. Still, as Thursday approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get very ugly. Deborah had had days to prepare her ambush. She would control the setting, the agenda, the audience. But what I didn't know, or what no one knew, was that Sarah had been preparing, too. And she had resources Deborah couldn't even begin to imagine. The whole thing felt surreal, like we'd walked into a modern-day gladiator arena. But here, the weapons were words, and the armor was indignation. Inside the community center, it was standing room only. Deborah had pulled out all the stops. There was even a projection screen set up at the front, like we were at some corporate summit instead of an HOA ambush. She stood proudly at the podium, dressed in what I could only describe as her power outfit, a sharp red blazer that screamed "I am important," and a tight, triumphant smile that never quite reached her eyes. To her left sat the other HOA board members. Their expressions said it all: regret, discomfort, guilt. They knew they were part of Deborah's ploy, but none of them had the backbone to speak up. As Sarah and I found seats in the third row, I could feel the weight of 100 eyes on us. Sarah was composed, her posture casual, as if she were attending a routine budget review. Meanwhile, I was sweating like I was on trial myself. "Thank you all for coming," Deborah began, her voice syrupy with false sweetness. "I know this meeting was called on short notice. But when the safety and reputation of our neighborhood are at stake, we can't afford to wait." She clicked her remote. The projection screen lit up with a dramatic title slide, "Protecting Our Community," a presentation by concerned residents. I had to admit she'd put effort into this smear campaign. "As many of you are aware," Deborah continued, "our new neighbor Sarah Johnson has misrepresented herself. She claimed to work in finance, but in truth, she is the new chief of police." A few people murmured, confused. Why was that bad? "Now normally," Deborah said, milking every second of her moment, "we'd consider law enforcement a welcome addition to the neighborhood, but after conducting some research, what I found is deeply troubling." Click. The next slide appeared, a blurry, old newspaper headline from 5 years ago. "Deputy Chief involved in controversial arrest." There was a grainy photo of Sarah. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. I saw Sarah's body go still beside me, barely perceptibly. She tensed. Her first visible reaction. Deborah, emboldened, went in for the kill. 5 years ago, Sarah Johnson oversaw an arrest that left a father of 3 with serious injuries. He claimed excessive force. He spent weeks in the hospital. Click. A photo of a man in a hospital bed appeared, bandaged, pitiful, manipulative. While the official investigation cleared her, Deborah said, dramatically pausing, "We all know how these things work. Cops protecting cops. The thin blue line. And now, this woman runs our police department." Click after click, slide after slide, carefully chosen quotes. Statistics about police brutality. A cherry-picked graph suggesting property values drop in neighborhoods associated with controversy. It was a masterclass in calculated defamation. I could hear whispers. See glances aimed at Sarah. The same people who had applauded her days ago were now buying into the spin. But Sarah? She still hadn't moved. No anger, no defense, no emotion, just calm, unnerving stillness. Until I noticed Ida, her lips moving slightly. She was counting down. In conclusion, Deborah said with theatrical gravity, "I move that the HOA formally request Chief Johnson's resignation for the safety and standing of our community." Hands started going up, first a few, then more. People nodding along, a ripple of groupthink. "The motion passes," Deborah declared triumphantly, even though the HOA had absolutely no power over a police appointment. But that didn't matter. She was winning in the court of public perception. "Chief Johnson," she sneered, "do you have anything to say for yourself?" Silence swept the room. All eyes turned to Sarah. She stood slowly, deliberately, calm as ever. But instead of going to the podium, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a single, folded document. "Ms. Cunningham," she said, her voice steady and clear, "that was quite a presentation. Impressive, really. Just one question. Did you happen to check the current status of the case you just paraded around?" Deborah's confident smile faltered. "The facts speak for themselves. That man was injured during your arrest." "He was," Sarah agreed. "Do you know why?" She unfolded the paper. "Would you like me to tell the group what that so-called father of 3 was actually doing when I arrested him, or should I skip to the part where he pleaded guilty to all charges?" Gasps echoed through the crowd. Deborah's color drained. That's not relevant," as she stammered. "Oh, but it is," Sarah said, voice rising just enough to command the room. "His name was Thomas Mitchell. He was convicted of running a meth lab out of his home, a home where 3 children were present. The injuries he sustained were from an explosion he caused trying to destroy evidence. An explosion that nearly killed those kids." She let the words sink in. "I pulled those children out of that burning house. I risked my life to save them." Murmurs turned to shocked silence. "And these," she held up the paper, "is a letter of commendation from the mayor, governor, and state attorney general, thanking me for my actions that day." The audience was frozen. "One of those children wrote to me last Christmas to thank me for giving him a second chance at life." She turned her attention back to the room. "Everything Miss Cunningham showed you tonight, it's public record, but it was carefully edited to mislead you. She gave you the beginning of a story and not the ending." She looked directly at Deborah, whose face had gone from red to white to a sort of stunned, splotchy gray. "That so-called victim, he's currently serving 25 to life for child endangerment and drug manufacturing." You could hear a pin drop. She tried to manipulate your emotions, Sarah continued, because she knew the truth wouldn't serve her agenda. The murmurs returned, but this time, they were turning against Deborah. People were shaking their heads. The board members looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. Someone even muttered, "Unbelievably broken bar," but Sarah wasn't done. She raised her hand for quiet, and to everyone's surprise, they gave it to her. "There's one more thing." "She's the broken bar, there's just one more thing," Sarah said, turning to face Deborah. Her voice was steady, calm, but now carried a sharpness that cut straight through the room. "You've just publicly slandered a law enforcement officer using intentionally misleading information. You've incited harassment against a public servant. And," she gestured around, "you've been recorded doing it by at least 15 different phones." Heads turned as people instinctively lowered their devices, suddenly aware of their part in this moment. "My legal team," Sarah added coolly, "will be in touch." The silence that followed was absolute. Deborah stood at the podium, lips moving, but no sound came out. Her grand moment, her perfect takedown, had just exploded in her face, and not gently. This was meth lab level devastation. But it wasn't over yet. Deborah had just been fact-checked into oblivion. But little Tommy? He still had one surprise left, the one that might make this entire disaster go nuclear. Type karma loading in the chat if you're ready to see how this ends. The weeks after the home meeting, where by neighborhood standards are shockingly peaceful, Deborah wasn't ringing doorbells or launching petitions anymore. She just glared from behind her curtains like a bitter ghost. In an emergency vote, the board had officially removed her as HOA president. And Sarah's legal team, they were already preparing a civil suit. Rumors swirled that Deborah was lawyering up, too, but I knew better. She was wounded, plotting, and way too stubborn to give up without a last stand. Meanwhile, Sarah threw herself back into her work as police chief, handling crime, strategy, politics, all with the same composed intensity that made her unshakable. But I could tell she was on edge. The little signs were there. She checked our security cameras more than usual, double-locked the doors. Deborah hadn't disappeared. She was coiling. Then came the invitation for our annual neighborhood outdoor movie night, a beloved tradition of lawn chairs, picnic blankets, and Pixar classics under the stars. "We should go," Sarah said casually over dinner. "Show them we're part of the community." I hesitated, half expecting Deborah to turn it into some spectacle, but Sarah was right. We couldn't live like we were under siege. And besides, little Tommy had been buzzing about it all week. He'd promised to save us a spot with his family. Tommy, by the way, had become a local legend. His junior detective badge, courtesy of Sarah, never left his neck, and his YouTube channel had exploded. The kid had fans. Movie night arrived warm and cloudless. The park buzzed with families, laughter, fold-out chairs. A massive inflatable screen glowed at one end, ready to light up the field with cartoon joy. Tommy waved us over the second he saw us. "Mrs. Sarah, Mr. Michael, I saved you seats." We sat up next to his family and settled in. And that's when I saw her, Deborah, sitting alone, way in the back, ball cap pulled low, sunglasses on despite the setting sun, like a cartoon villain attending her own roast. I nudged Sarah. "She's here." "I see her," Sarah said, barely glancing. "Let her watch." But something felt off. As the sun dipped and sound checks began, Tommy proudly pulled out his iPad. "Look." He beamed. 3.7 million views. He tapped the video. "Crazy Karen calls police on police chief," a full version. "Oh my God," I whispered. Families nearby turned toward the screen, curious. "Play it," someone called. "Haven't seen the full version." Tommy looked at his parents, got a shrug of approval, and hit play. And then the impossible happened. Through some technological black magic, a screen mirroring, Bluetooth, HDMI gremlins, Tommy's iPad synced with the event's projection system. Suddenly, his viral video wasn't just playing on his tablet. It was on the giant inflatable movie screen, in full 1080p. Surround sound. Deborah's voice exploded across the park. "She's suspicious. Arrest her. She's a criminal." Gasps, laughter, whispers. On screen, Officer Martinez revealed Sarah's identity. Deborah sputtered, shrieked, unraveled in high definition. Her meltdown played out in front of 500 people like a courtroom drama set to slapstick. The crowd was rapt. "This is so much better than the movie," someone whispered. I turned just in time to see Deborah bolt upright. Even through the shadows, I could see the horror on her face. She scrambled to her feet, tripped over someone's cooler and went sprawling. Juice boxes and lawn chairs flew. People gasped, pointed. Hey, it's her. Someone yelled. It's the Karen. The screen finally went black, but it didn't matter. Everyone had seen it. Within a week, a for sale sign appeared on Deborah's lawn. 2 weeks later, the house was sold at a very motivated price. The new owners told us they got a great deal due to some weird neighborhood drama. Deborah? She resurfaced in Florida. Someone forwarded me a headline. Local woman calls police on flamingo lawn ornament. Some people never learn. As for Tommy, his channel exploded. He passed 100,000 subscribers before Halloween and started a series called Hall of Shame. His most viral video, The Night I Accidentally Destroyed a Karen, ain't now sitting at 10 million views. But here's the twist you didn't see coming. The story you've just heard, this entire thing, has been live. That's right, you're watching this in real time. Tommy's sitting right behind me, filming. We're currently streaming to 847,000 viewers, right now. And the best part, Sarah's about to walk into this room. She doesn't know we're live. She's about to say something about the $500 million federal case she's been working on. Whatever she says next, you're all going to hear it first, so drop a comment. Hi, Chief Sarah. Share this video with the hashtag #KarenNewsPoliceChief. And if you're the millionth subscriber, Tommy's picking 10 random commenters to send exclusive junior detective badges to. Let's make this the most viral hoe story in internet history. And remember, if you've got a Karen in your neighborhood, document everything. Karma hits hardest when it's caught on camera.